Our story this week is how Israel loses God's blessings, from Joshua 24 and the beginning of the book of Judges. Joshua was a mighty hero. He had followed Moses, had been trained by Moses, and he brought God's people, the Israelites, into the promised land. And they conquered cities like Jericho and others, and they were prosperous. Before Joshua died, he said to them, Remember what God did for Abraham and for Isaac and for Jacob? You remember what he did for Moses and Aaron? Remember what he did at the Red Sea, how he parted the waters and saved us from Pharaoh? Remember what Balaam said and how Balaam tried to curse us but ended up blessing us? And remember how God gave us Jericho by that miraculous victory? Remember all the good things God has given us on top of his promise to send us a Savior and ultimately deliver us into the ultimate promised land of heaven. Remember all that, Joshua said? And so he gave them one final exhortation. If that's true, God has done all that for us, then fear God and throw away your idols. The other things that you worship, throw those away. As for me and my household, we will serve the Lord, he said. As a leader, he made that commitment. And the people responded, we will serve the Lord as well. To remember that day, they set up a big stone and called it Ebenezer, that they would remember this day and keep their promise. The stone itself would be a witness against them if they broke their promise of staying committed to the Lord. Well, Joshua, he made it to 110 years old. But finally, it was his time. The Lord called him home. He died and went to heaven. At that time, all God's people, they took and also buried Joseph's bones that they had brought with them from Egypt. Now they put Joseph's bones into the promised land as a sign that God had kept his promise. Well, finally, that whole generation, the one that spent time with Joshua and saw Joshua's great works that God had done through him, they too died and they went to heaven. But then that generation of leadership was gone. And then the Israelites, they started to pull out their idols. They worshiped Baal. The Lord saw that they had broken their promise and they wanted not to worship him, so he let them have it. He let them have what they wanted and he handed them over, hoping that they would see that they had lost their blessing and would come back to him, but they didn't. God, in order to bless them, then raised up judges, people that the Bible records like Samson and Samuel and Ehud and all kinds of others. God raised up judges to help the people, but they struggled, and things got worse and worse and worse as they got away from the Lord, and everything did the way that they wanted, everything that they thought was good in their own eyes. The people continued to refuse to listen to the Lord and his word, and they lost all of those blessings. But the gospel, the good news is that we hear that even though the Israelites stopped wanting to be around the Lord still loved them and still kept his plan to move those people forward so he would keep his promise to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob and continue to send Jesus Christ, the Savior, the Messiah, through the family. And that's our comfort, that even though we stray and try to get away from God sometimes, God calls us back and still blesses us with Jesus. This is the story of how Israel loses God's blessings, from Joshua 24.